Well, it's been a little while since I've done one of these videos, and we're about due for an interview. And this time around is with Don Norwine, another fellow cell collector. I don't want to ruin too much. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. I hope that we get to do more of these again soon. All right, here's Don. You were messaging some of your background, and one of the things that really interests me is when you were young, you said you met Walt Disney a few
Yeah, a
times.
number of times, yes.
Tell me that story. How do you end up meeting Walt Disney?
So my grandfather owned a printing company in St. Louis,
hmm
and he
What was the
sold
printing company?
it was Wolf Printing Company.
Interesting. See, I lived in St. Louis for about 5 years, and we all know Walt Disney's history with Missouri
Yeah, with
and up
Riverfront.
in the riverfront in Disney World, and how I think the legend goes St. Louis didn't want to give him the land, so he decided to go to Florida instead.
Actually, I think part of that is true. The most important part of that was his beef with August Busch.
Oh, yeah, with the alcohol at the
Yes,
parks. That's
and
right,
it was
because
interesting
Budweiser and
because
everything.
my grandfather tried to, kind of mediate some of that between Gussie and Walt, and it just kind of went south because Walt was adamant about alcohol in the park. He was, that was just a no-go for him, and so he just decided on Florida.
Wow. That is so fascinating. So, it sounds like your grandpa was pretty well connected in that world if he's there trying to ease things over. It would have I think a lot of people in St. Louis look at that and say, the what if? What if this was here as opposed to Florida? What that would have meant for St. Louis and the trajectory, because you look at that era and things were going very well, and then things didn't go so well for St. Louis.
Yeah, right.
And what that would have meant to have such a tourist attraction, and of course the backing of Disney in his home state right there on a beautiful spot. Tell me again what it was like as a kid, and did you understand the significance, the weight that a Walt Disney held? Like, did you understand it at the time?
So, just to kind of frame my age, I was born on the north and south of when I was born, probably by a couple of years. Warner Brothers released things like Duck and Muck, Duck Dodgers, and Bully for Bugs, and in the year after it was Beanstalk Bunny, Nightmare Hare, and Run Froggy Evening, and What's Opera Doc, obviously the one of the best, in my opinion, cartoons ever. And so in the late 40s, my grandfather's printing company was bought by Western Publishing Company,
Mm.
and he stayed on as a senior VP, and he did things like the Little Golden Books and the Gold Key Comics, Dell Comics. That was kind of under his purview. Well, at that time they were doing the Golden Books were doing the Disney prints.
hmm
So he got to know Walt, because Walt at that time, in the 40s, 50s, Walt was doing a lot of that business management himself, being out and about with the clients and all.
hmm
And he got to be friends with my grandfather. And so when he was in St. Louis, my grandfather would have him out to the house.
That's
And
amazing.
when I was there on a couple of occasions, and Walt would come, and as a 9-year-old kid, to me, because this was probably early 60s, 63, 64, a few years before Walt died.
Okay.
And he would be there. And to me, it was the significance of Walt Disney was, this is the guy that owned Disneyland.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's not just Walt Disney. He owns Disneyland.
Mhm.
So it was really, really pretty intriguing he was very, very nice. I mean,
Mhm.
and as much a smoker as he was, he would never smoke around me.
Oh, interesting. Well, the movie that came out about Mary Poppins,
Yeah, I think it was Saving Mr. Banks, or wasn't that it?
Saving Mr. Banks,
Yeah.
the way he was depicted by Tom Hanks, did you look at that and say, "Yeah, I see that"?
You know what? I think Tom did a great job
Yeah.
on that. I mean, it was, a lot of the mannerisms that Walt had, a lot of the way he carried himself and everything. He was just always Walt.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so you have this connection through family where you get an opportunity to meet Walt Disney. You see him in a different type of way.
Right.
He's building the park at this time, right? So, Disneyland, but Disney World at this time was being constructed. You probably Were you aware that, he's growing his empire?
Well, at that time, I think Disneyland was probably 7+ years old. Then Disneyland opened in 54, 55, something like that.
Mhm.
And he hadn't started Disney World
It hasn't
because
started it yet. Okay.
he went there after Riverfront fell through.
Right.
So
That's something else.
yeah.
Do you ever look back at your art and say, man, if knowing what I know now, I'd have loved to grab a photo with him holding up some of this art or whatever that you
Oh
own
God, all
today.
the time. I mean, that's really kind of any animation collector's dream,
Mhm.
is to look at the people that, and especially when I look back at the people that I've met, when I run through, what we've been through, in not necessarily in our lives, but in our generation or generation plus. We really have lived in a time that no other generation will ever be able to claim.
Mhm.
Right? We've lived through the genesis of animation back with Cole, and I guess the first renowned part of that was Winsor McKay with Gertie
Mhm.
the Dinosaur, up through where we are today. And we've been through Walt Disney, the 9 old men of Disney, the Friz Freelings, the Chuck Joneses, the June Forays, all of those people that have been part of animation history that most likely will never be repeated ever. I mean,
Yeah.
the way animation's gone today is just a different animal than it was when Chuck and Disney were doing, feature animation or cartoon animation.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because, I'm in radio. It's what I do in Detroit. But, I moved for jobs. Like I worked at a station. I worked at KMOX in St. Louis. You're probably familiar with them.
Hmm.
They're very historic. And I think about the way radio started right around 1920. And some of the people I met may have been like second generation radio people, meaning they learned from the people that were there when it was created, meaning they
Right.
were like at the very, very early stages of launching radio as an industry. And so I look at that and I say, okay, a lot of the people, at least ones that were, been around a while, they learned from the original people. I'm learning from some of them. I'm only a couple of generations removed from it. It's interesting to think that animation by itself, that we're like still within that window where animation was done a certain way up until about 2000. In the 90s, it was transitioning. And the people that are part of that transition are still working today in a different way in that medium. You're not that far removed, but we look at it and it seems ancient now because no one does it.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, now when I look at, because a lot of the animators that are out in California, people that worked on Roger Rabbit, for example,
Mhm.
in '89, and Little Mermaid, which was the last 2D animation that Disney did, really. Those guys still are the 2D animation guys.
Yeah.
Right? They are we want to see it on a drawing, we want to see it on a cell, we want to see it on the camera.
Mhm.
And that's really kind of, if you look at Disney now and any other place really, even the Simpsons, I mean, that's not the way it's done now, right? It's
Yeah.
all camera in the computer, really.
There's different things like physical things you can hold. So of course animation
Mhm.
cells. So what they call marionettes in the movies, they use them. Is that what they're called? The those statues, the
The maquettes,
maquettes. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think that's what it is, because I know
I
that.
I've said it wrong this whole time. I've only seen it written. I don't think I've ever heard it said out loud. Of course, there's drawings, storyboards. There's different aspects to collecting. Do
Right.
you collect all of those things or just some of them?
I Yes, to most of that. I don't have many maquettes,
Hmm.
especially anything that's production used. Those things are like, just gold, really. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at one of the things that Bill has in his collection, Bill Heater, is
Nightmare. What was the? I've seen the collections he's had.
so the one
The
thing that is probably well, kind of a coveted thing. He has a maquette of the Grinch,
Yes, that's right.
and he
That's
also had
amazing.
the um, original sleigh from Nightmare. He owned that at
Yes,
one time.
I think I've seen pictures of some of it on display. That
Yeah.
is amazing.
So
That
yeah.
do you look at that? Okay, let me just I'll say this because we talk about Bill Heater and he's a fantastic collector. Do you ever look at that and get jealous because you're like, whoa, how in the world can anyone have that? You think that it would be in a museum somewhere?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have come through, I think, all our lives, that we think, wow, how can anybody outside of a museum own that?
I
I mean,
know, it's amazing.
and those are things of huge significance. And Bill's had a lot of those in his collection that have passed through it. And I guess the only thing that you take solace in is that sometimes Bill will come over and look at something and go, I want that. And I'll go, oh yeah, finally.
Right? Well, it's like that in any type of collecting. If you're around long enough, and I haven't been collecting that long. I started during the pandemic, where in 2020 I started to see the Facebook ads, and they said, "Do you want to own a piece of?" It was Sonic the Hedgehog on the
Yeah,
old television stuff, and I'm saying, wait a minute. You can do that. You can actually own these things. I remember watching that cartoon in the 90s, and the price point was right. We're talking $20 or whatever. I thought, yeah, I'm going to try it out. And then as soon as I held it in my hands, I thought, this is a feeling that's amazing. And I just kept growing and growing. And here I am today. I never thought that, a $20 Facebook buy would have turned into a full blown obsession.
right. Yeah, right. It's and people by and large that I have dealt with in the past in business, and obviously the business people I deal with are kind of out of the loop.
Mhm,
They say, "What do you do for a hobby?" I go, well, "I collect art." They
mhm.
go, "Oh, wow, that's cool." When if they're over in the house and they're going, "What the hell is all this?" I go, "That's the art,"
They're thinking
because it truly
paintings,
is.
yeah, and
It,
things
it
like
is. It
it
is
is art.
absolutely an art.
And I look behind you, you have Grinch animation cells,
Mhm.
nicely framed. And it's so interesting because the Grinch stuff, I would say if you are an American, 98% of Americans have watched that, right?
Absolutely.
Have seen this. Now, I know sometimes internationally it's different because the things that we consume in America may not be as mass and broadcast like the, traditions here during Christmas. But I would say if you own a television, odds are you've seen that. And what you're holding up on the wall is literally what you saw on that television.
It's like, and I don't know many true animation collectors that kind of haven't done this. Is you look at a cell and then you start going through the movie and you look for that frame,
Yeah, I know.
and then when you find it, you're like, oh, this just really is great.
I know. Or sometimes you're watching something and you see a frame and you're like, "Oh, I remember when that was for sale. I should have bought that. That is so good." You feel that way too?
Oh, it's always the one that got away. I mean, it's
I
kind of
know.
like I was out in Las Vegas a couple decades ago, and I walked into a gallery there, and they had three Bugs Bunny cells.
Mhm,
One was Chuck Jones, one was Friz Freeling, and one was Tex Avery.
mhm.
And it was a pretty good chunk of change, probably because of the Tex Avery.
Yeah,
And I said, well, let me think about it. Well, I went back the next day and it was gone. And that was kind of I just shot myself in the foot because that's a set that I really would have loved to have.
oh, yeah. I don't own any Grinch cells. I would like to have a Grinch in the future. I do have a Roger Rabbit, and I'm happy to own that one, and I'm lucky because so I have a friend named Tim. He's in Australia, and he says that whole opening sequence where they're showing like the Roger Rabbit short, and he's in the kitchen, and all the knives are falling, and he's trying
Right,
to help
right.
the baby. He said that's an animator's dream. He said the way they animated that is, if you're in the animation business, you look at that as like the gold standard. And I have a cell from that sequence, and it was in the trailer for the movie. And I have it up on the wall, and it's in within direct sight. I'm looking at it right now. And it brings me joy every time I look at that. I say, oh, that's amazing. And there's a story behind every single one of these animation cells.
Right. I think that's what makes animation so personal and special because the story is different for every person.
Mhm.
But I look at it and I go, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember that scene. I remember where that fell in the sequence of the movie and what the significance of it was with the movie as a whole. And, that's just, it's really kind of overwhelming at times.
It's a little bit easier with the internet to find the exact scenes now when you're trying to search.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
would have
yeah.
been a little bit harder. Well, so, like, especially with the Looney Tunes and things, they made so many of these different shorts. So, I don't know what it would have been like to search for, like, unless you knew what the short was. Might have been impossible sometimes to find the matching scene.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it really was once it started to hit kind of the media where you actually had it at home.
Mhm.
There was no way you were ever going to find that stuff anywhere else unless you went through it frame by frame. Either, God forbid, you had to use a VHS.
Yeah.
But even with a DVD, you were going through frame by frame, and it's like, okay, let me see if I can narrow it to the 2 minutes it's in. Okay, now let's get down to a minute, and then when you're there, you're going 24 frames a second, going through frame by frame to see if you can find that exact match.
Yeah, and you hope your DVD player will go frame by frame as opposed to just trying to get lucky and
Yeah,
pause it right where it's at. How hard that was. And you're like, oh, rewind, play, stop. No, rewind. And you're like wearing the tape down. So right behind you, you do have the Grinch animation cells. Why did you decide? Because sometimes you have to be very intentional when you have a larger collection, what you decide to frame and put up on the wall, what goes in storage. How did you decide on what you wanted out on display, and why did you decide Grinch right there? I'm
so
curious.
there's a when I look at animation, there's some gold standards in that field that I really am attracted to.
Mhm.
I think that, when you look at, Jerry Beck came out with a book that was 50 greatest cartoons. And while I may or may not disagree with Jerry on everything, if you look at those top 10, four of those features are Chuck Jones.
Mhm.
It's, things like, well, obviously number one is What's Opera Doc? you
Mm.
know. So, but, when I look at things like the Grinch, that's one of those things that I love for a number of reasons. I had the fortune of meeting Chuck Jones many times.
Good.
And yeah, I even sat with him. My wife and I sat with him at the drawing table when he drew a Grinch and Cindy Lou Who,
Oh,
and then
wow.
did a watercolor out of it. And I have that hanging on my wall. So the Grinch has always been one of those Christmas specials, kind of like It's Christmas Time, Charlie Brown. And
Mhm.
that's another one of those that are kind of keystones in what I would consider, animation classics. And so I've always loved the Grinch, not as much as Bill, obviously, but I love the Grinch. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of that whole wall to my left is kind of my Grinch happy place. That's where I put the significant Grinch cells that I have up there.
Grinch happy place. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
That it does bring, and I primarily have focused on The Simpsons as of late. And, growing up in the 1990s, you got home from school, Simpsons was on every day after school. You ate dinner, you watched Simpsons, did your homework, Simpsons,
yep,
and on Sunday night, it was a must-see TV appointment. You go and watch The Simpsons. And I would say that was the show that I most gravitated towards. So when I first became a collector, I said, man, I would love a Simpsons cell. And then I was looking at, okay, $20 Sonic the Hedgehog or hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I don't know how I'm going to justify to my wife that I would be able to spend that right now for something that she doesn't understand. She's like, I don't understand the appeal. I don't get this. I don't know why you like it. I don't know why anyone would collect these sort of things. She doesn't get it. It doesn't attract her in that sense. But I found that eventually, you started getting more comfortable. I worked my way up. And then as sometimes want to sell things in your collection, you get a little extra money and you're like, well, now I can afford a Simpson cell. And then it just kind of blew up from there. And, I think I'm going to keep moving. Eventually I want to get a Grinch cell. And, there's these other ones that in my mind, I thought if it were ever for sale, I just need to be mentally prepared to get this because I know if I don't, I'll never have the chance again. So you have to just always be open to those things.
yeah. And that's the thing about animation, right? If you see it, that decision point is it.
Yeah.
If you do it, you're a winner. If you think about it, you won't see it again
Yeah.
unless it comes up at an auction somewhere, and you're bidding against everybody else in the world. I mean, it's just really a point in time thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So your wife, you said, was there watching Chuck Jones put this together. Does she share the interest with you? Did she look at that and have the same feelings?
I think now she kind of treats me as the household addict, and she's trying to get me on a recovery program. but but yes, she's through the years, she's always accompanied me to all the events.
Mhm.
Um, we've, like I said, we've talked to Chuck and sat with him several times to get drawings and things done. She there's a book It's
Mm,
a cookbook.
mhm.
It's actually sitting on the shelf behind me. It's Pig Legs and Frog Tales is what it's called.
Yeah.
And the cover was done by Chuck Jones. And Neiman Marcus put it out, and Diane had a recipe in it.
Mhm.
And we were at one of the events, and Chuck showed up, and Diane was showing the book to Linda Jones, his daughter. And she said, "You have to go show this to Chuck." So Diane went over to Chuck. He turned to the page where her recipe was, and he started adding ingredients like stewed rabbit and just writing it in the book, and then drew a big picture and signed it. And
So,
it's not animation art, but it's really one of those cool things.
yeah. So, did you get a chance to talk to Chuck? Like, did you actually have conversations with him, or was it mostly like what you see at conventions? You get like a couple minutes, and then it's someone else's turn.
Oh
But
no, it's
the,
with Chuck. It was really it, the thing about people like that, to me
mhm.
anyway, is your first inclination is, oh my God, it's Chuck Jones.
Yeah.
What am I going to say to Chuck Jones that won't make me sound like a complete idiot?
Mhm.
But he was very engaging, and he was kind of like, the wise old man. But he was, yeah, we had a number of chances to talk to Chuck, and just sit with Chuck and talk to him, or at the drawing board with him drawing. And it was really,
It's
really
amazing.
special.
Yeah, this is it's fascinating when you say Chuck Jones and you talk about some of the legends in the industry, and of course Walt Disney. And I know they're different ages. If I remember correctly, when there was the animators strike at Disney, I think Chuck Jones supported the animators, showed up on the picket line. Did Chuck ever ask about, like, did you ever talk about Disney with Chuck or anything like that? Did any of those things ever come up?
Well, it's interesting because y- a lot of people would always think, well, it's Chuck Jones, Walt Disney, it must be fairly acrimonious. Chuck actually worked for Walt Disney at one point in time.
That's right.
Yeah, a long time, a
That
long
was a
time
long
before.
time ago.
There was a time when I can't remember whether it was Schlesinger or whether the studio took kind of a turn. It was like termite terrace era, and Chuck was looking for work,
Hmm.
and he went. I think he spent 4 months at Disney working on. I can't even remember what the thing was he was working. It might have been, I don't know, Sleeping Beauty, for crying out loud. I don't remember, but he worked on it, and he said, it was great experience. Got along well with everybody, but he said, it's just kind of mind numbing. But he and Walt got along. I mean, there was a healthy respect on both sides of the aisle for what they did.
Yeah, that's interesting. Didn't you say you know one of the voice actors from Sleeping Beauty?
They do. In fact, I was on a call with her just before I got on this. Mary Costa. She
Yeah,
was the voice of Aurora.
that's so cool.
She is, and this that's where I knew her from when I first met her.
Mhm,
But oddly, she is a world-renowned opera singer. She performed all over the world,
mhm,
and she actually sang at Kennedy's funeral back in
mhm,
'63 at the request of Jackie.
mhm.
But she's lives in Knoxville now,
Yeah,
and I met her a number of back in the '90s.
yeah,
And when I think I met her briefly,
mhm.
and I sent her a note thanking her. And one day the phone rings, and I pick it up, and I said, hello, because it was my office phone.
Yeah.
She goes, Don, this is Mary Costa. And I was like, get the hell out. I mean, really? And again, that was it. Kind of, we met a couple of times after that. Well, one time it was really at a D23 event. And she's just a wonderful person.
Yeah. No, I had to look that up. So Sleeping Beauty was 1959,
59. Yep.
and then 101 Dalmatians was a few years later in 1961.
Yep.
I love the art style in both of those movies. And 101 Dalmatian, I don't know what it is. It's just a little bit different, and people try to mimic that art style now today. Um, so I guess by that point, animation is looked at in a lot more sophisticated way because I think did people at the time, you think, look at animation and say this is for kids, and it's Disney, and this is stuff for like Saturday morning for fun for kids, but didn't really recognize the art style as a legitimate, bona fide, beautiful thing at the time.
I think that, and Probably the Disney gods will come down on me for this. And it was kind of what I look as the taxonomy between Disney and Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Disney, when it would do its feature films, you looked at that and it was just, it was showing you, so it was presenting to you.
Mhm.
Warner Brothers tended to pull you into it and you were part of the cartoon.
Yeah.
You were part of what was going to happen to Wiley. You were part of what Bugs and Elmer were going through. When you turn on Bambi and the opening scene is his mother's getting shot,
Yeah.
those are, some of those are very macabre,
Mhm.
presentations for kids.
Mhm.
And if you look at some of the underlying themes, even in Sleeping Beauty, and some of those where, then you have the prince and Aurora, then you in the Dalmatians, you have Cruella. Those are some kind of dark times in what I would consider to be in a children's cartoon.
Yeah.
Children enjoyed it because it was animation.
Mhm.
But when you look at it now as an adult and you go, wow, there was a
Yeah.
lot more going on there than I realized when I was, 8.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's when I was, watching cartoons, and a lot of it came in the '80s and '90s, the animation was so much different then. They were cranking these things out, and, I think even a lot of people mocked it because it was just commercial, meaning they created them just to sell kids a toy, and I would say the art form to it was not necessarily the motive. It was to sell merchandise and things. But you look back at Disney and some of these, and you just realize that these artists were just doing some genius things, and the things that they were discovering and putting out there, Disney or Warner Brothers or whatever it was, it was just you go to admire it so much more as an adult. And I don't know how. Maybe as a kid you don't necessarily realize anything in the world, the beauty in some of these things until you grow up a little bit and you start to, in retrospect, look back at it. But again, it goes back to just owning some of these animation cells. It's like you I don't want to say you feel like you're a part of it when you own it, but you feel like there's a certain duty to preserve it
Yeah.
and to show its beauty off and make sure other people appreciate it the way that you look at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at things from 59 or 64 hanging on your wall, that's, 50, 60 years of animation history sitting in your possession.
Yeah.
There is a there is an obligation to that. And I think you kind of feel that when you look at it, you go, not only do I appreciate those cells, but they mean a lot historically.
Hmm.
Not individually, but as a time when, we won't see animation done like that anymore.
Hmm.
And it's just, it's different. It's at a time when animation had a whole different flair. In the
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, and I talk about Sleeping Beauty a lot because I don't think it was the best film Disney did by
Hmm.
any stretch, but it certainly is my favorite because of the people that worked on it and that participated in it that I came to know very well. Ron Diaz was a very good friend of mine. He was a background artist for Disney,
Hmm.
and the things that he would send to me and El were just, they were works of art, especially backgrounds. There
Hmm.
were works of art that you would look at and go, this really could sit all by itself in a museum.
Hmm.
And they were just that exquisite.
Yeah, I look at, and this is probably the bad way to explain it, but like 101 Dalmatians or Sleeping Beauty, when you look at the artwork, it feels like you're looking at straight lines almost. There's a lot of straightness to it. When you go back and look at some of the later stuff, lots of curves, everything's, very curvy. And there's something special about that era with the straighter lines. I just like that. I don't know why design wise I like that more. It's just you look at that and it's so distinct that I love stuff like that. Um, I when I look at different things that people collect, do you have a preference in poses? Do you like close-ups of characters? Do you like group shots? Do you like setup scenes? What kind of things do you like?
So if I look at a lot of what I have, I guess it depends on the film and the characters. If I'm looking When I look at some characters, I like I like the Grinch, obviously.
Mhm.
So when I look at a Grinch, I like a good Grinch cell. I kind of like I'm partial to the things that increase in rarity, and that's the time when you get to the Grinch where his eyes turn blue,
Mhm.
those blue-eyed scenes that are at the end of the right. Those are kind of some classic poses. That's where his heart starts to melt and he starts to
Mhm.
realize what's going on. His eyes go from that horrible yellow and red to a blue eye. I like those and the front on look of that. But I also like his interaction when he's interacting with Cindy Lou Who.
Hmm.
And so you look for cells that in the movie you looked at and said, "Oh, I really like that scene." Well, that's kind of it. I have a few what I would consider group scenes. Roger Rabbit, I have some from the closing where all the characters are watching Judge's Doom melt into the drain.
Oh, really?
And
Oh, no.
that's kind of a classic for me. But for the most part, I think most of my cells are one, two, three characters. Some of the Hanna-Barbera are more characters because of just the cartoons that he did.
Hmm.
But I think it really depends on the animation and the character rather than a preference overall.
Yeah. Do you like original backgrounds? Do you try to get the key masters? Does that interest you?
Not to the extent that some people. I love backgrounds.
Hmm.
I haven't spent a lot of time looking at key masters where you're matching up the cell and the background to a specific point because that's extremely difficult, and
Yeah.
B, that's a little pricey, you know. And but I do have a lot of backgrounds, not necessarily matched with cells, but I like the backgrounds because of the art. And when I look at Ron Diaz or Evan Earl, Preston Blair, those people that did backgrounds for Disney and all,
Hmm.
those are absolutely stunning pieces of work
Oh, yeah.
by themselves. And even the stuff that was done for Warner Brothers when you know they did all of the Maurice Noble. If you
Mhm.
look at his backgrounds, those are absolutely incredible pieces of art in and of themselves.
Right. Do you ever visit the Disney Morgue Archives preservation building?
I have not, and I've been harping on people like Floyd Norman and everything to get me in there, who still gets to Disney because he animated on Sleeping Beauty.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've talked to people that have been in there and people that were working there, and they told me what it was like and the amount of preservation efforts. It's a pretty extreme thing when you're talking about some artwork that, before you know it, it'll be 100 years old. It'll be here before you know it.
right.
It's some of these original the way that they were made. They weren't meant to be preserved, so you're working against time to try to minimize the damage as much as possible.
Yeah, these are things that were done on originally on the flammable acetates, and when they were done, they went to the wiping department, and
Yeah.
they would wipe it down because they were going to reuse it because acetate was money, or they just toss them in a burn bin, and that's when all the animators would go in there and grab stackfuls of the
Yeah.
animation and take it home.
Oh, it hurts me to think of that.
I
Ugh.
know.
It's like they say those scenarios, if it was like a burning house, what would you'd go in and save? And then like if you were at work and they were just like burning these things, would you run in and say, "No, stop." Like and the people that have dumpster dived and they found these things too. That's
Right.
amazing stories.
They used to find a lot of that. A lot of the Disney used to use some of the dumpsters that were just offset, so they were kind of in the public. But Disney didn't have to pay for those, so they would dump cells in there, and people would just kind of, on Tuesdays it was dump day, and people would kind of line up in the alley waiting for people to
It's the
dump stuff in the
line up
dumpster.
in the alley. I would have been one of those people knowing what I know now,
Oh, me
but
too.
yeah, it's amazing to me. And a lot of these different studios did exactly the same thing. And unfortunately, I think that people, at least these studios, they're pretty much at that point again. I don't think they want to store these things. I don't think they look at it as having the monetary value isn't worth their time to go and try to work with this stuff. I mean, some of the very classic Disney stuff, of course. I mean, they're preserving the history, but a lot of the modern stuff, it seemed like all of these studios, they just didn't respect it after it was basically filmed, and they
No.
just didn't look at it as anything. And some of these studios, same things. They don't like, from what I understand, if I remember correctly, even going up to like Pixar and things like that, they didn't really care to store any of this stuff. When it was done, it was done.
Everything else, when you run the business on financials, which is what they do, it's not financially advisable to spend a lot to store a lot.
Hmm.
You want to spend a little to make a movie to make a lot, and then you want to move on to the next one. And if that means dump what you had and move on. That's kind of what they do.
Yeah. Sad. Now, in retrospect, for collector's sake, you hear that and you think, no.
Yeah, yeah. That falls into the realm of criminal.
Yeah, no kidding. There's some things that are lost forever. Are there any things you've ever searched for that you thought were lost forever and then found something from? Has there ever been like a holy grail find for you?
I think I probably have a couple, but they're I wouldn't necessarily call them animation cells. I have a excuse me, a small piece. It's kind of a gag pen and ink that was done by Tex Avery.
Hmm.
He did it in 1932, and it was kind of a joke thing, and it's maybe 9 by 10.
Hmm.
And the thing of significance is, I think this is when he was with um, doing work for Walter Lantz. And in 1932 is when he lost sight in his right eye, horsing around at the office. Somebody hit him with a paperclip in the eye.
Oh,
This piece was done, and this is my assessment of it, just based on the line work, just before he lost his vision, because his lines were very crisp then. Afterwards, he always said that his perception was a little skewed, and so when you look at things like Droopy the dog and everything, and those lines are all exaggerated, which was kind of a Tex Avery style at the time, partially due because he was only looking out of one eye. But it's a neat piece, and I have that's the one that I'm sure that Bill will clamor over my corpse to retrieve.
Oh man. Yeah, I think about some of these different ones and I search all the time. Like I'm always looking and it's kind of obsessive. And I'll bring up my wife again. She's like, why? She
Yeah.
just don't understand why you spend so much time. And it's hard to explain. It's like, I just really like it. I don't know what it's like. And I think something you mentioned before that you've collected things, right? Like when you get older, you collect things. And when I was younger, I didn't really collect, when I was really young, I collect hockey cards.
Mhm.
And, just like a lot of my friends did. And I look back at them and I said, you know what I should have been collecting was Pokemon cards. If I had those today, that's what I should have been collecting.
Yeah.
The way the obsession is. But yeah, I found that of all the things I've collected, I've never felt this way over it. There's just something different about it.
Yeah, when I guess in what I would call the art realm, I really started off back in the early 80s collecting comic art.
Hmm.
And so I developed a lot of relationships with Johnny Hart, Brent Parker, Scott Hilburn, Dan Ferraro, Gary Larson, those kinds of people, because I loved when I looked at art. Then this was before I actually got into animation. To me, that was when you picked up a panel and you saw, 3 art panels that told a story.
Hmm.
That to me was amazing. It was and when I looked at the work that specifically Gary Larson, Scott Hilburn,
Yeah.
and let's see, I guess, and Dan Ferraro.
Okay.
When I look at those 3, those guys were what I would consider to be single panel artists. They drew one panel, and I thought, how amazing is it to be able to convey an entire gag in one panel?
Yeah.
A picture and a byline. That was it. And you looked at it and it just absolutely tore you up. And I love those. And until I saw my first piece of animation art.
Yeah.
And then I thought, look at this. This is just
Yeah.
a picture. There's no byline.
Mhm.
I look at that picture. I know exactly what's going on.
Right.
I know that the coyote's about to get hit by an anvil just by the way he's looking around. I know exactly what's going to happen and that's kind of the progression that I went through.
I didn't even know you can get Gary Larson art. Do you have any Gary Larson
I
Far
have
Side or
one
anything?
piece. It's not a published panel.
Yeah.
It's a piece that he drew.
I didn't even know that existed. That's pretty amazing. Now you've unlocked something in me that I'm gonna start searching for because I've never seen that anywhere before. I see on all kinds of Facebook Marketplace and things like that, people will sell like a page of a comic book. And depending on what it is, they could be pretty affordable. $100 for an original page that was used in a superhero comic book, and it
Mhm.
might not mean anything because but you look at it and you're like, that is so cool. This is the original artist that put this together. And that's, I think a great way to get into collecting things like that because
I agree.
because that's affordable, and you're holding something that is truly unique and amazing. Um, I don't think I've seen the comic ones. I've seen some of the oh boy, what was the Family Circus? I think I've seen things like
Bill Kane.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty popular. The Sunday newspaper comics, I'm trying to think of any other ones I've seen, but I guess they're out there. I've never researched it as much. Um, Gary Larson, man, he's really cleaned up. Like he's the just living off of the calendars that they sell every year. It's
Yeah.
pretty good. What a genius, too.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that, he was kind of what I would call a pioneer of single frame uh, comics rather than multi-panel. But when I did that and I started going through that, then I started looking at it and saying, okay, what's kind of an adjunct to that? Because my probably my all-time favorite, and I think probably the pinnacle of people in line work, was Al Hirschfeld.
mhm.
And his work to me was the caricatures that he did. That was some astounding work.
Mhm.
And so I picked up a couple of Hirschfeld originals that I think, these are amazing.
Do you still have them?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you normally hold on to everything, or do you sometimes go through and you're like, well, maybe I should sell this. I don't look at this as much. Do you ever, what as a collector, how do you normally handle that?
I have to talk softly about this. No, and therein lies my downfall. When I get something, I think, I need to get rid of something to do this, and then I go, well, okay, I'll get rid of it next time.
Yeah.
Well, the next time never really comes. So
It's like Jaws. I think I'm going to need a bigger
bigger
wall.
boat, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we built this house, we gave the architect 3 requirements. One was single story, and the second was maximum amount of wall space.
Yeah. You know what
Because
you're doing.
that's what I wanted to do with the art. And sadly, I really don't part with a lot.
So I'm looking at it, and this is kind of adjacent. It looks like you built shelves and you lean the artwork on the shelf. Is that how you
I did that
mount them?
actually, yes. Well, for a number of areas, I have either the metal or wood, but I got tired of every time I wanted to switch something around. And I do this with other walls more so than I could have just hung these, because
Mhm.
more so than this, I could have just put these on the wall, because I don't rotate the Grinch a lot. I may
Yeah.
pull in another couple of cells, but it's always Grinch.
Mhm.
But for the other things, I thought, do I want to keep pounding nails into the wall, or just put
Yeah.
up something where I can switch the art in and out and just leave it sit in a structured line format? And that's
That's
what I
nice
did.
and clear. Can I show you what I did? I've been
Sure.
experimenting with a couple of different things. Let me move my camera here, and I'll kind of like show. I got my Simpsons stuff here, so let me see if it can go. Um, if you can kind of see in between, I use like a rack system like they do for shelving.
Yep.
And instead of putting it horizontal, I put them vertical. And then basically, if it's framed, I can just hook it onto that. And if I want to unhook it, I unhook it. Let me see if I can. I might need it. I might need 2 hands to do that because it's pretty tight up against the wall. But I don't. Can you kind of see in between how it
Yeah. In
works?
fact, they do that at a lot of gallery shows.
Mhm.
Gallery showrooms use that a lot, where they have the kind of a mesh background where they hang all the art,
Right.
because then they can just hang another one right up there. That's great.
Well, I was trying to. Sometimes you think about, okay, what's the most pragmatic way to approach this? Because I know here's one thing I know about collecting. I'm going to find other things, and then eventually I'll be like, okay, I want to rearrange this. Maybe this could go better here, or maybe I'll take this one and I'll take it. And you have your favorite wall, and then maybe the secondary wall. Maybe I'll have to swap them because I find something I like better. So you got to make it easy. I don't want to keep putting nails in to
Yep.
readjust because things are different sizes. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. If I used nails, this house would now be structurally unsound.
Yeah, all over the
So,
place.
it really had to be, I want to move things around, either from this room to another, or this room back in storage, and put something up, another Grinch cell up here. And I
Mhm.
just want to swap a spot and not have to worry about, what I'm doing to the wall, or mostly how much time it's going to take me.
Right. I love having it. I mean, sometimes I'll be working and I'll just look over and I'll be like, oh, this is so great. And then you remember a lot of the different stories. Like the feel that you had when you saw someone posted on eBay and you're like, and the thrill of like checking out and buying it before anyone else can. There, it's a weird addiction feeling. I mean, that is true addiction.
Yeah, I know that you and Bill are huge Simpsons,
Mhm.
especially Bill's huge Simpsons.
Oh yeah,
And
Simpsons.
we were out in LA one time, and Bill said, "Do you want to go to a Simpsons table read?" And I said, "Sure." So we went to the
That's awesome.
Fox studio, went to a table read,
Mhm,
and you go in, and there's obviously a big table in the middle of the room, and then there's some seats that just are line the table against the wall,
mhm,
and you get a script. It's got your name on it, and you sit in a chair.
mhm.
And the lady came in and said, "Okay, there's just a couple of rules. Just stay here." And she said, "The most important thing is, if it's funny, laugh.
Mhm,
If it's not funny, don't laugh."
mhm.
Because in the back of the room are all the writers.
Right.
So they're going through the script, and you can see these guys when a joke would come up that nobody laughed at, they're just scribbling and crossing things out and making notes in their book
The
because
pressure.
they knew they
Oh,
just blew a punchline. And it was really just really amazing to watch that end of the animation.
that's amazing. You know, how nonchalantly it's so funny. Bill's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna go do this thing." And I know he's you're like, what an amazing experience that would be. And do you still have that script? Do you have it up somewhere?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they said the other thing was, and don't bother the talent after the thing. And I was like, well, okay, I'll resist because I'm that guy that usually does go up and at
Mhm,
least talk to them. And afterwards, the they turned around and said, started introducing themselves, and I went around, and Hank Azaria was there, and Nancy
yeah.
Cartwright, but and they wanted to sign the script and draw little things on it, and so uh, it went from person to person. But the funny thing was, most of them talked to me in character. So I
Really?
took the script over to Nancy Cartwright. The whole time she's talking to me, she's talking as Bart Simpson. And I was like,
Wow.
and Azaria is like talking to me as Apu.
That's amazing. What year was this? That
Geez, this would
what
have
season
been,
would you say, roughly? So,
I'd have to look. It was either late 90s, early
oh,
2000s.
amazing. So you have you might have a script to a classic episode, just one that people look at and say, "Oh, would they love that?" A cell from that episode.
I think it might have been a Treehouse because the script
Even
actually
better.
contained 3 episodes because
Yeah.
they kind of table read different parts through there.
Mhm.
And I think one of them was a Treehouse of Horrors.
That's awesome. People love the Treehouse of Horrors animation cells. They absolutely love those specials. Well, that's really cool experience. And I like that the voice actors they get it and they know that they're making people happy by doing that. So that makes them happy in turn.
And they're, I found, and this may be just me, found that people in animation can can be very, very accommodating and congenial.
Mhm,
My favorite, one of my favorite stories is I wrote a note one time to June Foray,
mhm,
and she did the voice of Cindy Lou Who, Natasha, Rocky,
mhm.
Witch Hazel. I mean, on and on. I mean, she's kind of like the Mel Blanc of her gender. And I sent her a note and I said, "I'd love to have you autograph." I think I sent her a picture of Cindy Lou Who.
Okay.
And again, phone rings. I pick up the phone and it's June for. She goes, "Darling, this is June for," and she's talking to me like Natasha. And it was June Foray. And we talked,
Awesome.
I don't know, for an hour.
Mhm.
And she said, "Do you want me to send this to you, or you want me just to hold it until you come out here and you can come over to the house?" And I said, "Oh, hold it." And so every time I went out to LA after that, June would always say, "Come out to the house. Come out to
That's
the house."
amazing. Oh,
And
that's
so
so
one time I
cool.
dragged Bill there and he was just crazy. I mean, it was just, she was something else. She really was.
That's amazing. You know, so many different animation stories. I love hearing things like that. You know, and I don't know if things have changed because of the Comic Cons and, a lot of these people can set up a table and charge $100 for that exact same experience if they just kind of like stop reaching out to fans because of that, because fans come to them through these Comic Cons. Do you think there's a little bit of that lost in modern time?
I think I think some of the people that reach out are going to reach out anyway, and they're probably just more
Yeah.
selective about who they would reach out to. I think that some of the people that, got, I don't want to say the older people because that's me, but as when you got to June Foray or even Mary Costa, some of those people are just much more genuine because they were from an era that was like that. Jimmy Stewart was like that.
Yeah.
I can't believe that he actually corresponded with me. And
Jimmy Stewart.
yeah, he could not
Wow.
have been. I sent him a note one time and I got a note back from him. And so I sent him something else and asked if he'd sign this picture for me.
Hmm.
And he sent the picture back and and in it was a big drawing of Harvey the Rabbit
Wow.
that he drew and signed. And about maybe 4 years after he died, I was just going through stuff and I had a lot of old envelopes. And one of them was the one that he had sent back to me.
Hmm.
And when I got ready to toss it out, I turned it over and a piece of paper floated out.
Hmm.
And I picked it up and it was a note and it said, "Dear Don, it's things like, it's things, it's people like you saying the things you say that make my career so much worthwhile. Thank you so much for everything you've done for me as a person, Jimmy Stewart."
Wow.
I thought,
That's something else.
forget the photo. This meant more to me than anything.
That's amazing to me. You know, I I wish I had any stories like that, but you kind of inspire me. Like I want to try that now and see who would respond, because a lot of times, it's so funny the way pop culture works. People move on, they get interested in other things, and I think sometimes people forget, like some of these people that were just a big part of, animation or movies or whatever it is. They feel like they're forgotten, like no one remembers them. But man, if they only knew how often we think about
Right.
think about them, sometimes it just takes a note to remind them.
Yeah. And I think some of those people like that like to be remembered in that way for the things they've done.
The only time I think so one time with my son, we wrote a letter to from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was David Newell. He played Mr. McFeely. So they have the animation, the Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. So I said, we should watch some old Mr. Rogers, see if you'd like that. Of course, Mr. Rogers, well past Fred Rogers, but David Newell's still alive. And I found that you could write letters to him and he'll write them back to kids, handwritten multi-page letters back to kids. And he sent my son a care package after he wrote him a letter. And he must have been like 6 years old at the time. So their handwriting's not great. We had to like help him with it. And he couldn't have been nicer. And I kept thinking, there's got to be a lot of other people like that out there that just do that for kids still. It has probably done it for decades.
Yeah. It's really pretty amazing.
It is. Is there anything we haven't talked about that would be fun to? Anything that comes to mind in the animation world that I'm not thinking about?
I don't think so. I don't know. Most of it's just stories and everything. And I don't know. You're probably familiar with Mark Davis, who's an
Sure.
animator for Disney. So,
Yeah.
and his wife Alice,
Mhm.
who was an incredible animator in her own right, and did a lot of work on the clothing for the dolls for Small World.
Interesting. I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, and I have the original 8x10 photos when the Small World was a ride that was installed by PepsiCo for the New York World's Fair in '64.
Hmm.
And that's when it opened. Well, when the fair closed, Disney decided to have the Small World shipped back to Disneyland.
Hmm.
Well, Teehee went out and he was in charge of ensuring that whatever dolls came down out in New York, he had to photograph all of them because he had to repair them when they got back to Disneyland.
Hmm.
And I, through some fluke of good fortune, ended up with all those 8x10s from the clock
Oh,
tower.
that's
But
cool.
I put them together in a collage and went to Alice Davis's house. This was long after Mark had died in 2000, I think. And so I give her this big collage and she just couldn't have been happier. And so we walk into what was Mark's office.
Hmm.
and she said, "Do you want to sit, have a seat at the animation desk?" And I said, I couldn't do that because that was Mark's animation desk, and
Yeah.
he brought it from Disney. She goes, "Well, you can just sit there." And I started to sit in this wooden chair. She goes, "That's a chair Walt used to sit in when he come to visit
Oh, is
Mark."
that
I said, "I
right?
can't sit there either." But she was just so cavalier about, "Oh, well, just sit there."
Yeah, that's amazing. I was watching a Antiques Roadshow where someone brought a jacket in, and she's like, I just bought this from an estate sale, and this is after O'Connor died, Archie Bunker, and it was just like a regular estate sale. The family goes through and they sell the stuff, and they're like, "You don't understand. You bought a screened used jacket that he had on in the show at an estate sale for $20." And you sometimes you think about people that have been around in the industry. They have a home and they just store it like anyone else would store anything else. And then one day someone doesn't know what it is because only that person knew what it was. In this case, the Walt Disney chair, they knew exactly what that was. That was the Walt Disney chair. But you think about like the homes of family members who worked for Disney or worked for whatever, they have no idea some of the things that are stored in their parents' homes.
Right.
And one day it's going to go to an estate sale and someone's going to pick it up and they may or may not know what they have.
That's exactly, and it may just be a piece of furniture in another room.
Yeah. And you don't know you have a Walt Disney chair. Like this is where Disney's at when he visited.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, wait a minute. Yeah, I feel in Detroit, I don't have the opportunities people in California have. It seems like these are where you find the gems.
Yep.
Like the storage units and things. There's nothing like that out here. You're not just going to randomly stumble upon a massive collection. It's almost exclusive, it seems like, to California.
Yep. Because that's where everything, every animation studio ever,
Mhm.
that's where they started. That was
Yeah.
the genesis of, Disney, Warner Brothers, Schlesinger, and all of
Yeah.
those guys, Hanna-Barbera.
Mhm.
All of those were out in California, as
Yeah,
were all of the people that worked there.
the Mark Davis you mentioned, it was just maybe 6 months ago. I found this really nice Garfield animation cell, and it was signed by Mark Davis, and I purchased it, and it got here, and it smelled like smoke, and I'm like, "Hey, by any chance, were you a smoker?" They're like, "Yep, family member was a chain smoker." I'm like, it kinda ruins it. Have you ever been disappointed in art you purchased that you're excited for, and you got it, and you're like, "Oh, this isn't what I expected," or "There's something wrong with it," and, does that ever happen to you?
A couple of times, most of it wasn't because of the seller.
Mhm,
I got something that was it was signed by Ward from his studio,
mhm,
and in transit, apparently they didn't load it on the truck. They just dragged it behind the truck when it got here. The glass in it had broken and it sliced up the cell. And I
oh,
mean, and it was a very low price cell when I bought it, but it was worth a lot. It
mhm,
was not worth a lot in as far as money, but it was worth a lot because it was a scene that I loved
mhm.
from the Ward Studios, and it was just completely destroyed.
What a disappointment.
Yeah,
Oh, bummer.
and that's happened a few times where something would show up, and I'd look at the box and go, "Oh, this isn't going to be good,"
Yeah.
and in fact, it was not.
Well, a lot of people, they don't use the glass anymore. It's the
Yep,
plexiglass, the UV archival type
yep,
of, and that's why, because they're afraid that the glass would break if
and
something
it will.
happened
Boy,
and it
something
would
drops
damage
off
it.
the wall,
Oof.
that's it.
Yeah. So people have really moved away from, but a lot of times you find things that have been framed for 30 years and it's of course glass because
Yep.
that's just what they used at the time. And you just hope you're like the way the postal service is today, man, it could take 2 extra weeks than you think to show up. So there's a lot of handling that goes on and bad things can happen during that time,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I always got to the point where I started telling people, if it was framed, I don't care what you do to the frame, just
Mhm.
take it out of
Yeah.
the frame and ship it to me flat.
Right. It's the much safer to do it that way. Or even if they just take the glass out. Like sometimes I've offered that, be like, okay, the frame doesn't have a lot of value in the sense that you're not buying it for the frame, but I can take this out or whatever. And sometimes people want it, sometimes people don't. But what I find is the stuff that I have, if they ship it in the frame, I got a pile of frames I don't think I'll ever use. Like, it's just a bunch of old frames that I've, put it because once you got like a certain style, you kind of want to keep it. And,
Right.
so there's a lot of like things that just don't fit or it's too big. And you're like, I don't have the wall space. I got to find something smaller. And you just end up with a pile of frames that you don't know what to do with.
Well, you know what that means. You now have to search for pieces to fill those frames.
Yeah. Don't tell my wife that. I'm always searching either way. I'll tell you, this was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I even like looking at the art across your shoulder here. And does this make you want to search the rest of the day and find something new after having some talks about it?
I'm sure I will actually. I always part of my days I always spent. I kind of page through the heritage auctions just to look and see what's floating through the market.
Mhm. Heritage Prop Store has been selling a lot of art lately too. Which ones have you purchased from? I'm curious.
I think I got the Roger Rabbit cell that I have, the one that is the end scene with all the characters and Judge Doom melting. I
Yeah,
got that from Heritage quite a
yeah,
while ago.
that's amazing piece.
And there's probably a few others that I haven't gotten any Grinch because heck, I might as well just buy them from Heater.
He's got the collection. Yeah, I went down to his Dayton exhibit. It was the one that was close to me. This
Mhm.
is last year, and he had a lot of Grinch and of course a lot of Simpsons. And you go through and you're looking at it, and it's just amazing. You're like, how can one person collect something this magnificent? Like this is like life's work. You're like, how in the world can one person do all of this? And then you're like, wait a minute, he's got other exhibits traveling at the same time. This is
Yeah,
just a portion of it. It's
and other
amazing.
collections. I
And
mean,
yeah,
his Nightmare collection. I mean, when you look at some of those black storyboard
mhm,
items, those are some spectacular pieces.
it's amazing. Yeah. Well, yeah, looking at the auction sites are a dangerous, dangerous thing. And it's tough because the time you have to commit to, like, okay, you don't know when it's going to come up. And if it does, there could be a bunch of other bidders and stuff. It's like you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. I have a hard time with those type of auction
Oh,
sites.
absolutely.
Yeah. You have to be super committed, like something you want really, really bad, because you'll spend all day waiting for it to come up. And then next thing you know, it goes
And
for a
then yeah,
thousand
then you
more than
walk
you
away
want.
going, I watched this all day to lose it.
Yeah, I know.
How
Oh, man.
disappointing is that? Not only did I waste a day, I lost the thing I wanted.
And it was fun watching everyone. It's kind of fun, some of these, the live videos and what they do on this. Um, I never got to experience the catalogs where, back in the day when they're like, okay, here's the price, and you can just purchase out of a catalog animation cells,
Yep.
like, the way they did, like, I guess Roger Rabbit was a good example of that. So they had a bunch of scenes and the prices associated with it. That seemed, you ever purchased it that way?
Yeah. Oh, a lot of the galleries used to send out the newsletters that said,
Yes.
okay, here's our art. All right. They'd have a section for Roger Rabbit, they'd have a section for Simpsons or Grinch or so.
Yeah.
And you could just look through and here's the price, and it's $1,800. Oh,
Yeah.
yes or no. I mean, you
Yeah.
either buy it or you don't.
If it was available, yeah. That seems easier. But it was cool probably getting it in the mail. That was exciting.
I have boxes of those catalogs because once the catalog came, I went, well, this is a good reference material. Goes in the box, and now I have boxes of reference material that I probably haven't
Yeah.
referenced in 20 years.
Well, no, it's good because I know there's collectors that use it to authenticate, to make sure, okay, was this sold here? Was this something that was actually offered to the public? And, they kind of use it as a way to like just cross-reference and double check. Have you ever thought you purchased something inauthentic or fake? Does that
Yes,
ever happen to you?
I
Really?
don't know many collectors that hasn't happened to, and I think some of you learn after a while that some of the biggest thing, like if you go out and find somebody to sell you a Bill Watterson,
Mhm.
I can almost guarantee that it's not an authentic Bill Watterson,
Really?
almost without exception. He just did not. His art just never escaped him.
Interesting. That's got to be a heartbreak too. How did you come about authenticating it? I mean, realizing it was fake. Was it just immediately known once you got it in your hands, or did you
Yeah,
have to go through
I
anything?
think some of the feel, some of the look. When you buy something, a lot of times a lot about the person that, especially if it's like a Chuck Jones, for instance.
Mhm.
What Chuck Jones strokes look like. The
Yep.
medium he used, that that black wing pencil was all he ever drew in. If you get a nice drawing that's got crisp lines and it may have been a pen, you might as well just put that as a placemat because it's not Chuck Jones. He
Yeah.
didn't draw that way. And so a lot of those you look at and go, this just doesn't, because usually you have something else by that person or from that. And you look at it and go, this just isn't consistent with the rest of the things I've got. And, while I couldn't say with 100% accuracy, if I'm 90+% sure, there's an odds on bet that it probably isn't authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, it's that's one kind of the disappointment associated with something like that. Sometimes you just got to assume the seller had no idea either, like, because they probably don't know.
Right.
Yeah, it's not their fault. They were probably duped along the line or whatever it is, and they just didn't know any different. I once met a person in St. Louis who said he made like fan art cells, and I said, "Do you make sure you disclose that pretty heavily?" He's like, "Not always." And I kicked that person out of the studio. I was so upset.
Yeah, that's
The guy was kind of weird to begin with, but people do that. And I guess there's sometimes you come across it on eBay where it's like, okay, it's in the description, fan, sell, or this was made after the fact, and it's pretty convincing. But the person that buys that, one, they may not know, or two, when they try to resell it, they may not disclose that. So it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, you would see that, and I saw that a lot of times where it would be in the description, it would say, in the style of Seuss, or in the style of Charles Schultz.
Yeah,
and as soon as you read that, you go, it isn't Charles Schultz. It isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't Ted Geisel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Don, like I say, this was really fun. I love talking about this sort of thing. And you know what? This YouTube channel, putting these interviews together, I used to do these back when I was a new collector. And I really enjoyed it because I learned a lot about the industry that way. And then I moved, and I haven't done one since I've moved, really. And it's been years. So you're like the first one in years I've done. And now I want to keep doing these again because I enjoy the conversation so much, talking to different collectors and learning from them. There's just so much to learn. And I love it. And, there's been things I've collected and you lose interest in. This is, I look at this and think like nothing's ever grabbed me like this. It's just so much fun to find something unique, to be able to feel like you're a part of it in some ways, to be able to preserve it. There's just something to it that it's just really magical. And I love talking to other people that feel that way.
Yeah, this is one of the obsessions of mine because have that pass in and out of obsession thing in collecting. It's one of those things that never faded. Other collections I'd collect and collect and collect, and then okay, I'd move on to the next one, and I was kind of done with that. Animation never got to that point. It was always like, I'll always be an animation collector, always.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found that sometimes the things that you want to collect changes, like, your okay, your focus may go in a different direction. You're like, okay, I didn't think that I would really like this, but I really do. Maybe I'll just get more of this. Like, so right now it's for me in The Simpsons. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll be like, okay, maybe it's a different show. I don't know. And I'll appreciate it in a different way. It's like your collecting may, interest may change a little bit over time. I don't know what that's going to look like in the future. I just know I really like this.
Yeah. One of the things that I collected kind of before the comic art was autographs.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to go to a lot of the shows out in, or the auctions out in LA. And I was at an animation auction out there in the 80s. And I was in the outside of the auction looking at what was coming up next, where they have everything laid out and you can preview the lots. And as I was standing there, I looked to my left and it was Jonathan Winters.
Oh, how about that?
And my first thought was to ask him what he collected. Not, can I have an autograph?
Yeah.
And I started talking to him, and I just, I asked him, which was a huge mistake, because right off the bat, he launched into this comedy routine. He asked me where I was from, and I said, well, I was, spent most of my life in Wisconsin at that point. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, Wisconsin. He said, I had a roommate that was from Wisconsin. He was part cheese, part evaporated milk. And then he just went on, and I was looking around, and pretty soon people were coming out of the auction to stand around and listen to him. And finally, the auctioneer stopped the auction and came out and said, can we do the comedy show later? I mean, it was just such a surreal experience. And it was like, I never even thought about autograph, because at that time I was looking at animation.
Yeah, that's
And that's kind of
interesting.
how the autograph piece just faded off into the oblivion.
Yeah. Is that how you met Bill, Wisconsin? Because I know he's from there.
He is from there. I did not meet him in Wisconsin. He lived in Wisconsin when I met him because
Yeah.
he lived in Neenah.
Yeah.
But
That's cool.
I met him out in L.A.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know Bill's got the traveling exhibits. We tried to get him up here in Detroit at the Henry Ford Museum, and I'm still going to hold out hope one day we'll get him to be able to display his art up here too. But I'll tell you the experience of walking into a gallery and seeing someone else's collection is something that people need to experience because it's just not a lot of that around. You just don't get to see things in galleries anymore in modern time. There's just like not like a place you can just go to and like look at fresh art that people have. It's I want people to experience that, and I'm hoping that maybe that could get more people interested in it.
I would hope so because that, especially at some point in time, if this stuff needs to go someplace, it'd be nice to have some publicity for it to go to.
Yeah, you don't want it to
And
be like Coca-Cola memorabilia.
yeah, right.
Because there's a lot of that out there
Yeah,
where people collected the Americana stuff, and it's like once the estate sales come around, there's not a lot of collectors like there used to be. Yeah,
yeah.
I would hope that this would have some lasting power. I really
I
would.
think that I think some of it will.
Hmm.
I think the things that are, the animation of significance, the things that were well known, if you say name a series and somebody would go Simpsons. Well,
Yeah,
Simpsons is going to be around for a while because it's been running for what, 30 some years.
yeah, yeah,
So, and you look at the classics like the Grinch and, What's Opera Doc. I mean, those are, finding something from What's Opera Doc is almost impossible. But
mm,
those are the kinds of things that are of more than just a collector. It's a historical significance like
yeah,
no other. I think those are the kinds of things that will keep part of the industry hot. I think some of the things that were kind of a flash pan, those probably come and go a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. Well, Don,
Sadly,
this,
I think
yeah,
Hanna-Barbera has some great things that kind of have come and gone, but now you come across a Wally Gator and it's $700.
oh, that's interesting. Yeah, some of those filmations and things, and I'm thinking about some of the things that were really popular. They cranked out a lot of stuff, and there's just not a lot of collectors on some of that stuff. And then some things have a lot of collector value to it. It's so strange because sometimes, like, I'm trying to think of a series that they gave a dime a dozen. Like He-Man comes to mind, and then all of a sudden, like there's a regained interest in it, and
Yeah,
all of a sudden people like started collecting it again. And they're like, or like SpongeBob back in the day, like in that first season, they're like, I would like to go back and purchase it when it was really cheap because it's not cheap anymore. There's a couple of examples of series like that where people, revive it and the interest grows, and all of a sudden, people look for other things to collect other than, the DVDs, and they find things like this.
yeah. My classic example of that was Ninja Turtles, Teenage
Oh,
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
yeah. That's right.
There was one time that a lot came up, and the production sales were $9 a piece.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I'll buy a few of those. And I bought them. They were wrapped, and I stuck them away, and they sat there forever. And then I guess it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was at one of the cons, and Kevin Eastman was there.
Mhm.
So I went up and I started talking to him, and he said, man, he said, all the things that I've done with Mirage Studios, he said, I just can't get away from Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
He said, it's just hotter than hell. And I'm thinking, well, I still have some of those $9 sales.
Yeah. Well, they had those at, like, KB Toys and
Yeah,
Kmart
yeah,
and stuff. They sold them on the shelf, and they were, like, super discounted for a while,
yeah,
and people love that sort, and there was a story that just came up online where a person said they did some work on a person's home and they were tipped in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cells because the person had a family member that worked for the studio and they had like a ton of these things. And as a tip, that's what they would give out to like people that came and service their home. I was like, that's cool.
oh,
That's amazing. I have one Ninja Turtle cell and I see them all the time. Like I mean, there's a lot of them that people sell right now. I like the villains in a lot of these cartoons and things. So like the Shredders and the bad guys and Ninja Turtles, I like those more than the main characters for some reason.
yeah.
That
They kind of were the genesis of the story, really.
Yeah, that's some cool stuff. Well, I got to say, this was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed doing this, and I'm glad that Bill connected us because I think I needed a good conversation like this. It's been a little while. So I'm glad that you shared your stories. I really appreciate it.
I love talking about this because it's something that obviously has been a passion and will be for probably forever for me. And it's really just fun to talk about because there's
Yeah.
always so much to talk about and so many things that you say, well, let's talk about this, and then you think, oh, there's 9 other things I'll talk about next time.
Yeah. Well, and there's some other things like my wife asked me the other day, if you died, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And I said, you know what? Maybe that's a good question to ask because the last thing I would like for you to do is open up a garage sale and for you to sell them like $10 a
Yeah,
piece. I would, I would have a hard time. Even being gone, I would have a hard time with you
yeah.
doing that.
You would
Like,
come back and say, no, no.
because because like I said, she doesn't get the appeal and or the value in some ways. And maybe that's for the best if she doesn't understand because she'll be like, wait a minute. So you're saying if this wall here would have been an amazing vacation is what you're saying. I don't want her
Several.
thinking that way because it's going to be like, then why don't you? And no, I can't think about partying with all these.
Yeah.
So
Diane sometimes will walk into an area and go, you know what? This is a down payment on a house in Laguna.
yeah. Or it's like, okay, I'll leave a note. I'll be like, only open after my death. And she'll be like, oh no, what deep, dark secret have you been keeping from this marriage this whole time? Be like, honey, I have to admit, these things are worth this much. This is what I want you to
Yeah.
do with them if you want to maximize it. Here's who you should reach out to that can
Yeah.
help.
Here's my secret spreadsheet of values.
Secret spreadsheet. Yeah. And she'll be like, oh, thank goodness. But at the same time, you've been holding out on this.
You spent how much?
Yeah, no kidding. Oh man, is that what you were doing down in the basement all those times looking at cells? Yeah, that'll happen at some point. It's almost a guarantee. Well, Don, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. This has been a
Ryan,
lot of fun.
it's the pleasure's been all mine. I really appreciate it. I love talking to you, and I hope you didn't feel pressured by Heater to make this happen. But
Oh, I'm glad you set us up. This has been fantastic.